Jesse, what is House Bill 1950, and what does it mean for the residents in your district?
House Bill 1950 is kind of become what we call the vehicle for Marcellus
Mhm.
shale legislation. We've really struggled at the state level to get some things in place, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not just a political Democrat-Republican thing; it's also a very regional thing. Marcellus shale means something different to every part of the state. In the Southwest and the Northeast, where they're actually doing the activity, we're worried more about the local impact and how do we allow the industry to develop and still keep most of that money local and deal with the real impacts, because there are real impacts. But in other parts of the state, it's more about can tax it, use the revenue for other things.
Mhm.
So there's been kind of an internal battle of, okay, well, if there's going to be is it a tax? Is it a fee? Is that money going into the state's general fund? Is it staying locally? There have been a lot of big policy issues that have made it difficult to come to any sort of consensus. One of the big things that we've come to realize is really kind of, I think, at the heart of the debate of House Bill 1950 has to deal with the issue of local preemption of ordinances. And what that means is you've had a lot of municipalities around here use, based on a 2009 Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, the Huntley case, which was a kind of the case on this. What it did was it realized that the existing oil and gas law and a lot of these statutes the way they were written, they were never designed to deal with the issues we're dealing with hydraulic fracturing and the deep wells and those sorts of things. So you're taking a bunch of kind of outdated laws and applying them to brand new technology and new situations. So there are all sorts of problems. The laws aren't adequate to properly deal with a lot of the issues. So what happened was, in the Huntley case, it said that municipalities have the right and the ability to use their zoning laws to promote to allow certain restrictions on drilling activity. They can't stop it totally, but they can allow for certain restrictions. They can make it a conditional use, for example. So in order to get a permit to drill, you'd have to get a conditional use permit. And what that means is, if it's a permit by right, you don't need anybody's permission. It's a use by right, you just do it. Okay. Now, to get a conditional use, you're still allowed to do it, but you have to have it approved by the local zoning hearing board or the local township. And they would have to lay out, if there are conditions specific to that site. Say it's right near a residential area and there's concerns about noise, they could ask for a sound barrier, something like that, whatever it may be. Those conditions would have to be met before the activity could continue. What House Bill 1950, one of the main components of it, in addition to the financial impact fee stuff, is they would preempt basically all of the local ordinances that are out there. So all the work that these municipalities have done over the last couple of years to develop ordinances that they feel are reasonable would all be wiped away. And what it would say is drilling would be a permitted use within 250 feet of a structure in just about every zoning district. Okay. And even more important than the drilling, we talk about the evolution of the issues. The drill sites are one thing because they're kind of temporary in that you come in, you drill, you frack it, it's a few months of a mess, and then you reclaim it, and you basically move on. And there's the footprint's relatively small, and it's short term. What we're really dealing with now is kind of the next phase of this is the infrastructure of the natural gas industry.
Roads, everything else.
Well, not just that, it's the pipelines. It's the compressor stations. Compressor stations are a huge deal because they're built to last for 60 years. And under this bill, House Bill 1950, as it was drafted now, you would be able to do a compressor station 750 feet from somebody's house. And it's one of the arguments that we've had where we're saying, if you're going to do this, is it reasonable, for example, just to throw one issue out there, would it be reasonable to say you should have to have electric to run them as compared to running them off of generators? Running them off, because what they want to do is, a lot of the companies want to run them off of natural gas because it's abundant, it's there, they can, it's easier for them and it's cheaper. The problem is the emissions are much higher. The noise is much higher. It's not nearly as good as if you're running it off of phase 3 electricity that's brought in, which may cost more to bring it in, but it's a better way to fit it into that community.
And it's also disrupting the people of that community.
Right. So we've had instances where people want to put a compressor site, like right next to a housing development. And we're like, okay, well, you have to get you have to run it on electric and not on generators. And they're saying, well, we can't get the electricity out there. And then you go and talk to the power company, they're like, yeah, they never contacted us. So it's one of those things where, when you do a little digging, you realize what's going on. But again, that comes into what is the right way. The right way for them, that company, to do it for their bottom line is to run it on natural gas and generators because it's cheaper. Mm-hmm. But is that the right way for the community? And the thought is, if you want if you want to come in and be a member of this community and have your business here and have a structure that's going to have a generational impact, is there an obligation there to do it the right way?
Well, homeowners are probably looking too, not just the fact that it will be, it could be possibly noisy, in the emissions level, but also, if people want to talk about property values, a resale value of their home. That's a big thing that people bring up now.
That's a perfect example. And the compressor station that I was referencing was over in Cecil Township, and there's a home right across the street from the proposed site, and it was like a $650,000 home. And the guy's trying to sell it, and he said his value's just plummeted. Mm. So, and the companies are saying, oh, that's not true. Well, it is true. And again, if we're gonna have an honest debate about these things, you have to be honest about what's really going on. Mm. And because the public gets it, you may not get it when it's 2 towns over, but when it happens in your town, you get it real quick. And that's what we've learned, is that people, when it's immediate to them, they pay attention. So what we're saying is, we think it's reasonable for local municipalities to have the ability to pass reasonable zoning ordinances. And we think that there was just a Supreme Court case that came down this week to kind of reaffirm that. They're trying to strip that away. So that's like the big political battle. And as someone who was a township supervisor before I did this, and I think that to me, it's kind of a fundamental thing. If we hear all this talk, we want, less big government and all, the same people that are saying we want less big government are saying, take away the local control, give it to the state. So it doesn't.
It's contradictory on terms.
Yeah, exactly. It's an area where, if you really look at it, you're thinking, wait a minute, something's not right here. So that has really been, from my point of view, one of the biggest sticking points in House Bill 1950. There are a lot of other things about that bill that I just didn't like. For example, they wanted to give permitting abilities taken away from the DEP. They were going to let the DEP basically subcontract permitting out to other energy companies so that they would allow another energy company to review your permit. They would approve it, and the DEP would just rubber stamp it. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Now are we allowing the fox to regulate the hen house
exactly.
here? And it's those sorts of things where people that have legitimate concerns are saying, wait a minute, what's really going on here? And then you get into, it's just out there. The money and the politics of it, and there's it becomes a very highly charged issue very quickly. So I know that I've worked with a group of municipalities in a Marcellus municipal co-op that we put together. To deal with a lot of these issues and inform people. And the municipalities, I think, have really done an admirable job. We're dealing with township supervisors and borough councilmen. This is a part-time job for them. Mm-hmm. They've become educated very quickly, and it's funny, when you read the news articles, sometimes the PR reps for some of the industry companies, paints every municipal ordinance is unreasonable. Every township supervisor is a wide-eyed crazy person. That's simply not the case.
There's a lot of all or nothing in the industry.
Right. And what you hear anytime that you try to look at finding ways to find that balance, is you hear, oh, we can't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Mm-hmm. We hear that a lot. And my response to that is, no one's trying to kill the golden goose. But you also don't let the golden goose run around and go to the bathroom all over your yard either. There is a middle ground here. And unfortunately, we're stuck in this scenario where there's some people that have kind of entrenched themselves and said, if you don't agree with everything that we want to do, 1,000,000%, you're opposed to clean energy, you're opposed to America and apple pie and all. And we're saying that's ridiculous. And I think that we need to drop a lot of that rhetoric and realize that there is a middle ground here. It's, to me, the definition of compromise is a scenario where nobody's totally happy. And I think that's where this is going to have to end up. No one's going to be totally happy with the end result, but I think there are ways to allow some local control consistent with the law. And it's funny because there's some of the hypocrisy that we've seen is where I have municipalities that I represent where They're dealing with the same company. They have an ordinance in municipality A that is fine. The company will work with them. There's no problems. When municipality B tries to pass the same exact ordinance, all of a sudden it's unfathomable. It's unworkable. We're filing lawsuits. We're going to court. We're getting everybody all riled up. And it's like, wait a minute. If you could do it here, you could do it there. And, you know, when you hear all this talk about these local ordinances are killing the industry, this industry is thriving in Pennsylvania right now. I don't know how it could be thriving any more than it already is. And that's with the existing ability to do ordinances. So it's pretty disingenuous. Is it really hurting your industry, or is it, I think it's more than anything, having local ordinances sets up a framework for local accountability. If you have to come in for a conditional use permit on your first project and you don't do it the right way, you will then have to answer for that because you build a reputation when you come in for project number 2 and number 3. And to me, the good actors, and if you're really doing everything as well as you claim to be, and if you're the leader that you claim to be, you should welcome that accountability, because it's going to allow you, as a good actor, it's going to let the cream rise and let everybody else fall. So if you're doing everything the right way and you're going above and beyond the law anyway, like you claim you are, what is the problem with going through these processes? You know, and we hear, oh, it's going to delay us. They do their drilling schedules 2 to 3 years out. A conditional use permit has to be acted on under most ordinances within 60, 90, 120 days at most, or else it's deemed approved. So again, when you look at the reality of it, their arguments don't make a whole lot of sense. And to me, that's what frustrates me as a policymaker, when we're trying to have an honest, fact-based debate, and then you hear these kind of talking points out there that are just, you know, are not real. They're not realistic. And now you have to spend all your time going out and, you know, shooting down that misinformation again. And it's frustrating because it's being put out by people that know better. And then at the same time, you're trying to sell yourself as a good neighbor.
Absolutely.
So there's a, you know, that's kind of the, you know, kind of the battle that we face. And, you know, it's tough to do. It's a tough middle ground. And, you know, sometimes you have to be really on top of it and not be afraid to kind of call out a little hypocrisy on both sides, and hopefully keep everybody steered in the right direction. So when we get to bills like House Bill 1950, which is a really important piece of legislation, I mean, it's going to have an impact for years and years to come. I mean, this is the kind of thing we do once and kind of move on. We're not going to revisit it a whole lot. So
get it right the first time.
Yeah, let's knock off the BS and, you know, and dumb down the rhetoric, and let's be real with each other and do this the right way to allow your business we don't want to have to be combative. But sometimes you're not giving us a choice because you're saying and perpetuating things that we just know simply aren't true.
So, Jesse, our final question today is, if you had Chuck Norris, Tim Tebow, and Craig Adams,
okay,
who would you pick for the winner?
That is a question for the ages right there. I think that it would all depend on what we're... First of all, I'm going to throw Tim Tebow right out. I think that I'm not even going to bring him into the debate. So I think you're going to get down to the real heavyweights here, which would be Chuck Norris and Craigie Adams.
So, Jesse, our final question today is, if you had Chuck Norris, Tim Tebow, and Craig Adams,
okay,
who would you pick for the winner?
That is a question for the ages right there. I think that it would all depend on what we're... First of all, I'm going to throw Tim Tebow right out. I think that I'm not even going to bring him into the debate. So I think you're going to get down to the real heavyweights here, which would be Chuck Norris and Craigie Adams. I think the question... I think that's going to all hinge on kind of what is the competition. Is there a choice of weapons or something of that nature? But I think at the end of the day, I think the Chuck Norris thing is he's kind of run his course a little bit. I think that if you're going to take on, if I'm Craigie Adams and I'm going to take on Chuck Norris, the playbook has already been written. You know, there's already been so much said and done about him. Craigie, at the end of the day, went to Harvard. I mean, he's a smart guy. I think he would have done his research on Chuck Norris. If Chuck Norris has a weakness, Craig's going to be able to exploit it. And Craigie's just a straight up warrior. So I'm going Craigie all the way.
Good answer. I'll agree with that one too. So, Jesse, thank you for joining us today on the Marcellus Connection Business Spotlight, where you can visit us at marcellusconnection.com.